Part 10. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 91. Chapter 91. The ups and downs only happen in a moment. The military commander, who was always kneeling not far from the third prince, kowtowed heavily and said, "I would like to die to apologize." Although he is young and energetic, he also knows how to be measured. After a few rounds, he made concessions and made concessions, which gave the third prince enough face. Just when he was determined to knock off the sword in the third prince's hand with one move, he never expected that the third prince would suddenly pass over and directly hit his blade with his chest. Everything happened too suddenly, and everyone was caught off guard. He knew he was innocent, but at this time he knew even more that any explanation he had would be in vain. If you hurt the prince, you are destined to die. Since this matter was committed by General Hua's subordinates, General Hua is the most suspicious. The third prince is in danger now. Even if General Hua makes up for his mistakes, he must be severely punished. Your Majesty, this matter is definitely not a trivial matter. I hope your Majesty will investigate and deal with it strictly for the sake of my well-being in Ziliang. The officials who had been flattering Hua Yaoding just now were now standing in the ranks of King Rui. They criticized with their writing and words, and with their voices. The generals who were full of glory just now looked at the ugly faces and clenched their hands in their sleeves. Their generals are dedicated to the country and are loyal to them. How can they tolerate the slander of these people with red lips and white teeth? Hua Yaoding looked at his aggrieved and forbearing subordinates, and finally slowly bent his knees. But even though he was kneeling on the ground, his back was straight. Your Majesty, it was Wei Chen's incompetent teaching that caused his subordinates to lose their sense of proportion. Wei Chen is willing to use his merits to make up for it. I beg the Emperor to see that Wei Chen has been loyal to the country for many years. I only hope that the Emperor can show mercy and bypass this reckless subordinate like Wei Chen. Emperor Yongchang was not unmoved by these four words. This means that Hua Yaoding gave up everything in his hands, including his existing military power. Concubine Yu's scream suddenly sounded, "Son, my son, open your eyes and look at your concubine." Emperor Yongchang looked at the unconscious third prince, and ordered angrily, "Come here, press all Hua Yaoding's men into Dali Temple and wait for investigation." The guards in yellow mantles rushed in like a swarm of swarms. Hua Yaoding looked at his subordinates who fought with him through life and death on the battlefield, and his usually straight back was trembling slightly. It was only now that he suddenly realized these four words. His great achievements shake the Lord. The third prince was seriously injured and fell into coma, and was carried directly to Yuyu Palace. Ji Hongliao personally diagnosed and treated him, but there was still no sign of the third prince waking up. Emperor Yongchang became more and more angry and ordered the imperial army to go to the military camp. All the four sons of the Hua family in the military camp were taken to the prison to await trial. The Hua family, which had been prosperous for a few hours, unexpectedly suffered this misfortune. Such a dramatic ups and downs made everyone in the court panic. Even the generals in the court who had always cared a lot about the Hua family were staying away at the moment. After all, no one can bear the wrath of Long Wei. When the Hua family heard the news, they all felt like a bolt from the blue. Several panicked daughters-in-law found the old lady one after another. A group of cheering people crowded into the main hall. Tao Yuxian quickly sent out all the servants in the mansion, and was busy asking them to divide their troops into several groups to find out the news. But as it got darker, none of the people sent came back. Tao Yuxian's face was dark and gloomy. His hands were always on the handle, and his palms were wet. When everyone saw this, they felt even more unsure. The little daughters of the Hua family held their mother's hands tightly, and their clothes were soaked with sweat. Xinying looked at everyone's gloomy expressions and was so frightened that they started to cry, "Mom, Mother, is our Hua family really doomed? What should I do in the future? I don't want to be like that Fan Qinjiao. I still don't have a father. I want my father, I want my father. Tao Yuxian said angrily, how outrageous. Seeing this, Xinying cried even harder. Faced with the really angry old lady, the eldest daughter-in-law Ling Wei didn't dare to step forward. I cursed in my heart and knew I would take it out on my junior, but I still covered Xinying's mouth and said coaxingly, don't worry, it's okay. No one can bully you if you have a mother. Tao Yuxian frowned and was about to continue speaking, but suddenly he heard a voice outside the door. If you are so unable to withstand the wind and rain, you are not worthy of being the daughter of my Hua family. As a daughter of the Hua family, you must know what you are carrying on your shoulders. This voice. The hearts of everyone in the main hall beat heavily. Tao Yuxian stood up and looked at the door. Master. Hua Yaoding strode into the door and glanced at Xinying coldly. Everyone has the qualification to step on the Hua family, but you are not. Xinying was so frightened that she stopped moving at such a majestic and oppressive manner. The eldest daughter-in-law Ling Wei's legs went weak and she almost fell to her knees. When the other daughters-in-law and younger daughters saw this, they tightened their lips one by one. Hua Yaoding walked to his wife and softened his tone, go and get the mahogany box from my study. Tao Yuxian's heart trembled violently, and he closed his eyes. In the end, he said nothing and turned to get something. Not long after, Tao Yuxian returned and personally placed the box in the hands of her husband. Hua Yaoding glanced at the female relatives who were supporting each other all the way, and first called several daughters-in-law in front of them. Opening the box inside, he took out a few of the property deeds. There are 8 land deeds in total. The positions are a little off. I'll give you a hot bite in the future. Take them and share them. Several daughters-in-law of the Hua family instantly turned red-eyed, and the younger daughters even sobbed softly. In the hearts of all of them, Hua Yaoding's existence has always been majestic and harsh. They were terrified even if they took another look. But it was such a taciturn and stern person who was thinking about them at the most critical moment. Hua Yaoding was silent, and then handed the box in his hand to Hua Yuelian. The remaining things are all for Xiao Qinjiao. A few keys, a few deeds of sale, and a small square seal. The white jade on the seal has turned slightly yellow, which shows its age. This seal is the seal of the Tao family's medical daughter. It has been passed down from generation to generation. It should have been kept by you, but now it is given to Xiao Qinjiao. At this point, Hua Yaoding discovered that Xiao Qinjiao was not there. Tao Yuxian quickly said, that kid Qinjiao went out to run some business and is not in the house now. Hua Yaoding felt sour in her heart. Happiness, distress, and endless pride. After settling his gaze, he looked at his daughter again. Little Qinjiao can bear the title of the Tao family's medical daughter. As for those keys, they lock some external belongings. Xiao Qinjiao will be informed of their location. When the news is over, you and your daughter will be able to live a stable life. Hua Yulian shook her head. She wanted to say a lot, but when she reached her lips, there were only a few words left. Father, I won't leave, I won't leave. Back then, she acted arbitrarily and left home. Now that she comes back again, even if she dies, she will die here. Hua Yaoding knew that he didn't have much time now, and he had no time to talk about truth. Be obedient, your mother will arrange for someone to send you to Luyi. There is an old subordinate of mine there, and he has a life-saving relationship with me. I will definitely treat you and Xiao Qinjiao well. Father. Hua Yuelian had already burst into tears. Hua Yaoding called Sui Rong in again. Sui Rong is his secret guard and has always been responsible for protecting the safety of the Hua family. Sui Rong came quickly and knelt on the ground when he saw the prince. Hua Yaoding stood up and went to the desk, quickly writing a secret letter. Tao Yuxian had a severe throat obstruction. She knew that her husband was explaining the affairs after his death. Finally swallowed all the pain and sorrow, she looked at the daughters-in-law in each room. You should immediately pack up your belongings and go back to your parents' home. If the Hua family can survive this period, you can come back. If not, let's all leave. The daughters-in-law suppressed the reluctance in their hearts and all fell on the ground to salute. They don't want to leave, let alone leave. But they have to go, they have to raise their daughters. These daughters are the roots of the Hua family. Only the eldest daughter-in-law, Ling Wei, glared at Hua Yuelian coldly when everyone stood up. They are really just a drag, and now they are still trying to divide up what should belong to them. After his daughter-in-law left, Hua Yaoding also handed the letter in his hand to Sui Rong. Find a way to enter the palace and give this letter to the queen. Remember, the queen must read it. The main city has been sealed off, and the Hua family can no longer withstand any disturbance at this time. The only way to do this is to let the queen come forward to find Xiao Qinjiao and prevent Xiao Qinjiao from returning to the main city. A burst of noisy footsteps suddenly sounded from far to near. In the midst of a blaze of flames, dozens of imperial guards rushed into Hua's house in plain sight. King Rui sneered and walked up from behind. The emperor has a decree, please ask General Hua to enter the palace immediately. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 92. Chapter 92. Fan Qinjiao is back. The daughters-in-law, who had just returned to their respective yards, were so frightened that they stood watching from a distance. In the main hall, Hua Yaoding knew that what was supposed to come would eventually come. He looked at his wife who had been with him for many years with reluctance. Madam, you must take care of yourself. After finishing his words, he held his chest high and walked out of the main hall without looking back. Master. Tao Yuxian's body was trembling slightly with Hua Yuelian's support. It is said to be an invitation, but with so many imperial guards wearing long swords at their waists, how can it really be an invitation? She didn't dare to blink, let alone blink. I'm afraid this farewell will be forever. The news that Hua Yaoding was taken away spread like wildfire. The already turbulent situation has become even more precarious. In the palace, the third prince also drew his sword and used medicine, but there was still no sign of waking up. When Emperor Yongchang learned of this incident, he immediately ordered a strict investigation of the major general who had harmed the third prince, and all those who asked for mercy would be strictly investigated and dealt with. The lights in Yuyu Palace were brightly lit, and the palace people stood in the courtyard tremblingly, waiting for summons at any time. Everyone is like an arrow on a string, not daring to release their breath. Concubine Yu, who burst into tears, retreated from all the palace guests and stayed alone with Bailey Rongs. After all the palace people had exited, she wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes, gently touched her son's face, and whispered, "Since you dare to take this sword, my concubine will never let you suffer this pain in vain once." The physical suffering his son suffered made the emperor forget about Yuzhu. Even if the emperor delayed the matter of Yuzhu because of this, no one in the court would dare to say anything. After all, it is the emperor's son who is lying on the bed now. Just to divert the emperor's attention, this alone is far from enough. Since the emperor also wants to suppress the powerful Hua family, she might as well take advantage of the situation and follow the trend. Thinking of this, concubine Yu called out, "Come here, go and take Fan Cheng." Before she could finish her words, the palace maid who came in a hurry said, to the queen, "Prince Rui is here to visit his highness." Concubine Yu was silent for a while, and then an unknown smile flashed in the corner of her eyes. He came at the right time. Yuyu Palace is always lit like daylight, and candles are always lit here in Fenji Palace. Lily looked at the frowning empress and persuaded her softly, "My empress, you have also warned me. I didn't expect that the third highness would use his body as a bait. I'm afraid that Yuyu Palace is inseparable from the matter in Yuzhu." The queen sighed, if it weren't for the emperor's intention, how much trouble could Yuyu Palace alone have caused? She knew that the emperor was becoming more and more suspicious. Unexpectedly, This time even the Hua family would become victims of the emperor's suspicion. Yan Qian hurriedly walked in from the door. The queen is not well, General Hua has been invited into the palace by the emperor. The queen's heart beat heavily. Too fast. Yan Qian lowered his voice again. The queen, General Hua's confidants, also sneaked into the palace. After saying that, he gestured to the little behind him. Sui Jun, who was pretending to be a young eunuch, knelt on the ground and handed over the secret letter in his hand. The queen quickly glanced at the secret message in her hand and closed her eyes silently. Hua Yaoding's backhand is pretty good. It's just that he's afraid that Fan Qinjiao's child won't do what he wants. Sui Jun kowtowed eagerly. The general begs the queen to help the Hua family. The queen slowly opened her eyes. I will never stand by and watch the affairs of the Hua family. Then the descendants brought pen and ink. Quickly, he wrote a letter and called his confidants over. She gave her own letter and Hua Yaoding's letter together, and warned, give both letters to the prince. Others didn't know where Fan Qinjiao was, but she knew it. The confidant nodded and jumped out of the back window with the letter in his hand. Yan Qian also hurriedly left Fenji Palace with Sui Jun. The queen's heart was not calmed by the quiet palace. She looked at Lily beside her and asked softly, what do you think the child will choose? Bailey Fengming was standing on the city wall of Luyi with Fan Qinjiao when he received the letter from the queen. It was the Chinese Valentine's Day, and it was also the second day that Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming rarely got together on the road. Luyi is a small city, but the smaller the city, the more suitable it is for the occasion. The atmosphere of Chinese Valentine's Day has spread all over the city. Standing on the high city wall, you can see the lotus lanterns floating in the river pond, and above your head are the sky lanterns that express feelings. After getting along with each other for a few days, Bailey Fengming could feel Ayao's closeness to him. But when he looked at his mother's secret letter in his hand, each word turned into high walls, pushing Ayao away again. Even so, he still did not hesitate at all and handed the two letters to the people around him. No matter what she chooses, he will respect her. And is willing to accompany her side by side. Fan Qinjiao took the letter suspiciously and was instantly separated from the festive atmosphere. Hua Yaoding's subordinates intend to murder the current third prince. All the men of the Hua family have been taken to the prison. Hua Yaoding was trapped in the palace. Those sudden words made Fan Qinjiao's eyes ache and become even colder. However, the last sentence in the grandfather's letter was to implore the queen to prevent Xiao Qinjiao from returning to the main city. All the coolness dissipated because of these words. She is just a weak female family member. If she really curls up outside, the emperor will not really do anything to her. Fan Qinjiao raised his head and asked firmly, when can we arrive at the main city soon? Bailey Fengming said without any surprise, if you ride with me, it will take 2 days at the latest. The Sa Feng he rides on is a royal horse with blood. It chases the wind day by day and can travel thousands of miles in a day. Fan Qinjiao nodded, take me back. Bailey Fengming said without hesitation, okay. Bailey Fengming not only talks about doting on her, but also does it. After returning to the camp where everyone rested, they handed over all the others to Xiaoxian and Lin Yi. Xiaoxian and Lin Yi definitely disagreed. Even the fifth prince was furious. It's just that this time Bailey Fengming didn't give them any room to disagree. Su Shaoxi didn't say anything, but looked at Fan Qinjiao, who was riding with Bailey Fengming, with a playful look in his eyes. No wonder he can be picked out in advance of such big things in Yuzhu. It turns out that Fan Qinjiao's backer is actually the prince. Fan Qinjiao and Bailey Fengming rode together in the wind, silent from beginning to end without saying a word. The wounds that had finally scabbed on both sides of Aoki were torn open again, and the flesh and blood were all rotten. She said nothing, did not apply medicine, and wanted to return to the main city as quickly as possible. The heat in August in the main city is unbearable, and the scorching sun shines overhead. Fan Kinjao only felt cold after entering the city gate, the kind of cold that penetrated into his bones. Before arriving at Hua's house, Fan Kinjao got off his horse and said goodbye to Bailey Fengming. "Thank you, Your Highness, for accompanying me all the way. I'll say goodbye now. I hope Your Highness will take care of you." Even if the Hua family was as usual, she would not be able to appear with the prince. Not to mention that she is now the granddaughter of a criminal. Bailey Fengming looked at the thin figure gradually disappearing with deep eyes. "It's not convenient for me to return to the palace now, I have to go out of the city to wait for Xiao Wu and the others." Fan Kinjao's voice was cold and cold. "Your Highness, the Crown Prince does not need to explain anything to your maiden." Bailey Fengming looked at her stubborn appearance and didn't know that she was keeping the distance between them. But his warm eyes were surprisingly firm. "Wait for me to come back." He said nothing and rode away. Fan Kinjao's hands that had been clenched were loosened as he left. When she turned around, the remaining warmth in her black eyes was completely gone. In the main city, you can hear rumors about the Hua family everywhere. Those slanders against the Hua family are like sharp knives, scratching at the Hua family's contribution to the country and the people over the years. The door of Hua's house was wide open, and the boy who guarded the door had long since disappeared. The people stood at the door and looked curiously. As soon as Fan Kinjao appeared, he attracted all the attention. Standing his back straight, Fan Kinjao stepped onto the steps, each step being so steady. Just as determined as when I came back. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 93. Chapter 93. Even if I fall, I can still carry it. After seeing each other for a few days, the mansion still looks the same as when I left, but it feels indescribably empty and lonely. Now the only one left in the main courtyard is Aunt He. Aunt Su simply moved here with all the servants from Minjiu Yard. The strong smell of medicine lingered in the main room for a long time, and the atmosphere was so solemn that it made people breathless. Ninghan and others stood aside in fear, not daring to show off their anger as they looked at the sick man on the bed. Hua Yuelian lay beside the bed and watched her mother sleep, and her sleep was not peaceful. The old lady has been ill for several days. She has been taking medicine every day but has not improved at all. The so-called doctor does not heal himself. This is what people are afraid of if he does not help himself. Cough cough cough, cough cough cough. Suddenly, Tao Yuxian, who was asleep on the bed, coughed dryly. That crackling sound seemed to require all the strength in the body to be coughed out. Hua Yuelian suddenly woke up and got up to visit her mother, but her eyesight turned black due to lack of physical strength. A hand suddenly supported her shaky body. Immediately afterwards, there was a sound of gasping in my ears. As her vision gradually became clearer, Hua Yuelian saw another hand pressing on her mother's wrist. Look up along the hand. Crescent moon. It's her Yu Yair who is back. Hua Yuelian cried on the spot. The people in the room were also stunned and felt as if they were in a dream. Until I heard Fan Kinjao say, "Two people came over and helped Grandma up." Everyone was shocked and came to their senses. It was really Miss Kinjao who was back. There were no sentimental greetings, and there was no sorrow for autumn or spring. Fan Kinjao had no expression from beginning to end. After Grandma Su and Grandma He helped the old lady sit up, Fan Kinjao opened the needle bag he carried with him, untied his grandmother's clothes and inserted needles into several large acupuncture points. After noticing that her grandmother's breathing was completely stable, she wrote a few more prescriptions and gave them to Ninggan. The first 2 cards draw 3 decks each, the next 3 cards draw 5 decks each, and the last card draws 7 decks. Ninggan nodded and ran away. Fan Kinjao looked at Aunt He again and said, Take out the century-old ginseng in the warehouse, go to someone to buy a pot, then come back, soak the whole ginseng in it and bring it to me. Mother, he responded, yes, I'll do it now. Fan Kinjao looked at the other servants at the door again, go out and wait. No one can come in without my summons. The people did not dare to say anything and retreated one after another. The dead air began to flow, and finally a new flow of air came in. Hua Yuelian clenched the veil tightly and said hoarsely, you yatter, you. Fan Kinjao raised his hand to wipe away the tears from the corners of his mother's eyes. Mom, there is no need to worry, I'm back. Hua Yulian's eyes that had just been wiped were filled with tears again. Your grandfather is under house arrest in the palace, and all your uncles are still in prison. Even Fengning, who is far outside the main city, was there yesterday. You were taken to the criminal investigation department. What can you do if you come back at this time? The Hua family was in trouble, and she had already prepared to live or die with her mother, father, and even the Hua family. But she was just a daughter. How could she just watch her fall into the sea of misery? Fan Kinjao gently stroked his mother's messy hair and said softly, people always come up with solutions. Mother, there is no need to worry. As long as I am here, the Hua family will not fall down. Even if it falls, I can still carry it up again. She comforted her mother with a gentle voice, and even had a faint smile on her face, but her eyes were always looking at the corners of her mother's chapped lips, feeling so distressed that her chest was shaking. Hua Yulian looked at the twinkling light in her daughter's eyes and nodded with tears in her eyes. She can trust her crescent moon. Tao Yuxian, who was lying on the bed, slowly opened her heavy eyelids. As her vision gradually became clearer, she saw her grandson, whom she could only see in her dreams these days. Kinjao, Fan Kinjao did not speak directly, but lowered his head slightly along the tremblingly raised hand. When she noticed that the hand covered with vicissitudes of life was touching her nose and eyes over and over again, she remained silent and motionless, forcing herself to swallow back the sourness stuck in her throat. When the real feeling was clearly conveyed to the bottom of his heart, Tao Yuxian spoke again, Master, it's really our little Kinjao who is back. Grandfather. Fan Kinjao's heart tightened and he bit his inner lip to death. Gently holding her grandmother's hand, she calmly swallowed a mouthful of blood, her expression as calm as before, Grandma, don't worry, Grandpa will come back. I promised you when we separated, no matter what rain or shine, I will carry the Hua family and keep going. Tao Yuxian's eyes were hot and he nodded gently, Grandma, wait. Fan Kinjao slowly stretched out his hand and touched his grandmother's wrinkled face, you must take good care of yourself and watch the Hua family return to glory. Tao Yuxian felt sleepy and closed his eyes again under Fan Kinjao's touch. Miss, I bought all the medicine, Ning Han's voice sounded outside the house. Fan Kinjao helped her mother go to Ruin Tao first. Mother will stay here with Grandma to sleep for a while, and I will boil the medicine for Grandma. Don't worry, Mom, I will take care of everything. Hua Yuelian is really tired after supporting these days. It's strange to say that in the past, she had trouble falling asleep no matter how sleepy she was, but today she was so sleepy that she couldn't open her eyes before she even lay down. Perhaps this is what is called peace of mind. Fan Kinjao left Nanny Su with her grandmother and mother again, and then got up and left the main room. In the yard, Ningtian and Lanja stood on the left and right like two door gods. You are still young, but you are full of energy. Especially Lanja's focused and fierce gaze like a wild wolf, which scared the servants in the yard and did not dare to approach him. Fan Kinjao called the two of them to him. He didn't say anything, but just raised his hands and put them on their shoulders. Almost instantly, the fierceness in Ningtian and Lanja dissipated, and even their eyes softened a lot. Fan Kinjao patted the two of them on the shoulders again, and then followed Ningtian to the kitchen. This is her person. There is no need to say much, just one movement, it is understood that she is walking side by side with them. While taking advantage of the opportunity to cook medicine for his grandmother, Fan Kinjao learned the whole story from Ningguang, including why the Hua family was like this, how she was canonized as the county head, and even how many people King Rui brought into the house to arrest the grandfather. Fan Kinjao held the fan in his hand and narrowed his eyes slightly. The emperor and concubine, you are very close to each other. Grandma He, who was carrying the wine jar, was worried after hearing this. Miss Kinjao must not be impulsive. The one who is pressing down on the Hua family now is Ziliang's 9th 5-year plan. Who can reason with the emperor? Fan Kinjao suddenly stood up and warned, Mother He, just keep the medicine in the stove on low heat. When Grandma wakes up, she takes 3 drops of wine soaked in wild ginseng from the wine jar and drops it into the medicine. Just give it to Grandma to drink. Grandma He was stunned. Where are you going, Miss Kinjao? Relying on the battlefields that my grandfather conquered to secure the world, and enjoying the peace gained from my Hua family's battles in the palace, I really want to see how shameless those people can be. Fan Kinjao, who had no intention of giving in, naturally would not sit still and wait for death. Ning Han, go to the birthday coffin shop in the east of the city now and buy me all the good coffins. Ningguang nodded happily, yes, miss. Mother He was panicking, Miss Kinjao, what on earth are you going to do? Do what? Naturally, I went to meet those who trampled on the flesh and blood of the Hua family. Fan Kinjao's eyes were dark, and there seemed to be a cold wind whistling behind them. She will let those who want to see the Hua family fall see with their own eyes what they can gain by angering the Hua family. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 94. Chapter 94 is the young lady from the Hua family forced to have a baby? All the coffin shops in the east of the city have received a large order, and they are all in a state of confusion. No matter how hard they tried, they couldn't think of anyone who could use so many coffins. Hundreds of coffins are enough to send the entire main city into a panic. At the door of Hua's house, Grandma He almost died of fright when she looked at the densely packed coffins. Wearing filial piety and a cold look, Fan Kinjao called Ning Han to his side, pick up the gongs and drums for me. The louder the better. Ningguang responded loudly, yes. The sound of gongs and drums suddenly sounded, and the sound was so loud that it pierced the eardrums and made people tremble in the heart. And he looked at Miss Kinjao walking out of the threshold, crying and begging, Miss Kinjao must not be impulsive, that is the emperor, if something happens to you again, how can I tell the masters in the house? Explain. Fan Kinjao peeled off Nanny He's hand on his wrist, the king is the king, and the minister is the minister, so if the king wants the minister to die, the minister has to die. It's a pity that I am not his minister, and I can't tolerate and give in. With me, the Hua family cannot bear this loss. After saying that, Fan Kinjao stepped down the steps. One man walks forward in sackcloth, followed by hundreds of coffins, moving against the wind, kicking up dust. Such a spectacular and strange sight spread throughout the streets and alleys of the main city in an instant. People who want to watch the excitement don't need to ask at all. They only need to look for the sound of gongs and drums and they can find it accurately. Fan Kinjao was making such a loud noise, so he was definitely not mourning his grandfather and uncles. They are still alive and well, and it is not her turn to come to mourn them yet. What she wants is the eyes of all the people in the main city. She wanted to see if the man in the palace had the ability to really dare to break the hearts of all the people. From the incident in the Hua family until now, all the men have been arrested, but there is still no conclusion. It was obvious that the person in the palace knew that even if his concubine and his son framed Grandpa's men, they could not really put Grandpa to death. So the man in the palace is waiting, giving his son time and more, giving his concubine time to continue pouring dirty water on the Hua family. Min Ning Hao. Silent and peaceful. What a ridiculous title. I'm afraid Emperor Yongchang has long been afraid of the military power in his grandfather's hands. Common people rushed towards the coffin one after another, and the crowd on both sides of the coffin grew larger and larger. When they saw Fan Qingjao walking at the front, their hearts trembled. When they looked at Fan Qingjiao's forward route, they felt their scalps were numb. Again, further ahead is the royal palace. Does this young lady from the Hua family still want to force her to have a baby? Just when the people were suspicious, they really saw Fan Qingjiao standing at the gate of the palace. And those densely packed coffins were also lined up in the open space in front of the palace gate. The people were dumbfounded looking at the scene in front of them. There is only one thought left in my mind: Miss Huajia is crazy. Fan Qingjiao called Ningguan to his side and explained carefully, take all the boys back home. Neither Ningguan's life nor the lives of the servants who were loyal to the Hua family behind her should be lost here in vain. Ningguan's eyes turned red immediately. Miss, I won't leave, I will stay with you. Fan Qingjiao wiped the tears from the corners of her eyes. There's nothing worth crying about. Go back and wait for me, and be obedient. Miss, are you really going back? Meeting. Ningguan saw that Fan Qingjiao's eyes were calm, so he walked back with the boy behind him. Fan Qingjiao watched them leave, even smiling, but she was the only one who knew that her palms were already wet with sweat. She was actually not sure about this battle. But even if there was a little hope, she still had to give it a try. Turning around, facing the towering and majestic palace, Fan Qingjiao slowly knelt on the ground. Things like momentum are the least needed right now. Today she is here to reason with the man in the palace. Such a spine-chilling sight shocked the guards in front of the palace gate. The guard commander ran to the palace to report the news without any delay. In the courtyard of Yuya Palace, a voice sounded soon, reporting to the emperor, Miss Huajia is blocking the entrance of the palace alone with hundreds of coffins. In the main hall, in addition to Emperor Yongchang who came to visit the third prince, there were also many officials, most of whom were related to concubine Yu and belonged to the third prince's party. When everyone heard the news, they thought they had heard something wrong. They blocked the entrance to the palace and placed coffins in formation. How dare that little daughter of the Hua family? But the guard commander outside the door made it clear that Fan Qingjiao really dared. Concubine Yu burst into tears, not to mention that Hua Yaoding's subordinates injured the third prince. A little daughter of the Hua family dared to block the palace entrance. Your Majesty, you must make the decision for me. Emperor Yongchang. How to make the decision? How could he, a majestic emperor, show off to a little daughter in person? The palace gate is connected in all directions. Even if he didn't see it with his own eyes, he knew that there must be a sea of people in front of the palace gate now. Fan Zixio knew that this was the best time to show his loyalty to both the emperor and concubine Yu, so he knelt on the ground first while others were still silent. The evil barrier was still at peace when he was in the Fan mansion. I don't know how the Hua family managed to train the evil barrier to become so lawless. Your Majesty calms down. I am willing to come forward and teach the evil barrier personally to share the emperor's worries. Seeing that the opportunity was rare, King Rui wanted to stand up and follow him. However, even with his stout figure, his movements were very slow. Before he could stand up, several ministers knelt down behind Fan Zixio. They are all willing to personally come forward to share the emperor's worries. Emperor Yongchang really didn't expect that girl from the Hua family to be so courageous, approaching the palace alone. But he is a wise and benevolent king, and he cannot afford to worry about everything with a little girl. Especially in front of the people outside who admire him. After thinking about it, Emperor Yongchang made the right decision. The Hua family has served the country and the people for so many years, and they have worked hard without any merit. It would be best if we could persuade that girl to go back. The emperor is wise and the emperor is kind. Fan Zixio and others kowtowed to accept the order, and then exited the main hall backwards. However, As soon as they left Uiyu Palace, their backs straightened up, and they chatted about home affairs without fear. After all, she is just an unknown little girl, so what can she do? It's just that if you're scared, you'll cry. Fanzixio is the most silent among the few. Of course he is not afraid, but he can't wait to walk in front of that evil obstacle now. The shame of being in the Hua family last time, I finally found an opportunity this time. The shadowy figures formed a group from the east side gate of the palace. Fan Kinjao, who was kneeling quietly in front of the palace gate, raised his head following the sound and looked at several people led by Fanzixio and assisted by officials from the 6th department. He was not surprised, but felt a little bit familiar. In the last life, these people were all the followers of Imperial concubine Yu and Bailey Rong's staff. It's just that she was standing with them at that time, so it was only natural that they would use her to murder Zhongliang in the court. In this life, since she chose not to associate with Bailey Rongs, she naturally stood against them. So come on. Let her see what other abilities they have besides sowing dissension and killing people with knives. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 95. Chapter 95, Come and kill a pair, come and kill a group. In front of the palace gate, the atmosphere was so quiet and depressing. The common people standing far away were silent and did not dare to breathe loudly. Fanzixia walked up to Fan Kinjao first and stood condescendingly with his hands behind his back. Several other ministers followed, looking at people with their cheeks raised and eyes downcast, showing great style and majesty. They are ministers and pillars of the dynasty, so they don't bother to talk to a little girl. So they hope to overwhelm Fan Kinjao with complete momentum and let her retreat without a fight. Fanzixia was already prepared to run away in fear when he saw this bad guy. Sure enough, Fan Kinjao moved. Sneers gradually appeared in the eyes of several ministers, but they saw that Fan Kinjao just moved his knees and turned his head to look aside. These are several meanings. Fanzixio's expression immediately changed and he reprimanded angrily, "No wonder we can train subordinates who dare to murder the prince. It seems that the education of the Hua family is nothing more than this." Fan Kinjao followed the sound and looked sideways at the grandfather he had called for several years. His voice was calm and he said, "Prime Minister Fan is a courtier beside the emperor, but I am also the county head who was personally canonized by the emperor, with the title Qingping." Fanzixio had forgotten about this, and said again with a frown on his face, "It's just a small title, why show off your power?" Fan Kinjao's words are clear and every sentence makes sense. Since the founding of Ziliang, the county chief has been on equal terms with all officials. It is a duty to treat each other with courtesy. It is my duty to stand up straight and talk to you. Regardless of what I think, I will be with you. Prime Minister Fan doesn't have any affection, so if Prime Minister Fan accepts my gift and kneels down, what etiquette will he use to return it to me? Fanzixio hated the girl in front of him to death, but now he was hit so hard that his chest hurt, and all the majesty on his face gradually became ferocious. The ministers next to him would not let Fanzixio mess around. Wouldn't they all become a joke? Guo Yin, the Minister of Official Affairs, took a step forward, arched his hands upwards, and then said, "The Hua family cannot escape the blame for the third prince's serious injury no matter what. It is because the emperor is kind and has not tolerated a strict investigation, but the young lady outside the Hua family is now early. What are you doing blocking the entrance to the palace with so many coffins?" Fan Kinjao did not say anything or be humble. "My uncles were imprisoned in the Shenxing division, my brother was pressed into the sky prison, and my grandfather was under house arrest in the palace. After returning in triumph, he was trapped in those layers of cages. What crime do you want to impose? I'm sorry, I'm just sending my relatives off as a filial piety. Is it wrong? You are simply making something out of nothing. The ancestors of the Hua family have served the country for generations. My grandpa has fought for the country all his life, fighting with iron and steel, fighting battles on the battlefield, for the well-being of the emperor, the prosperity of the country, and the peace of the scholars. But now something happened to the Hua family, but no one is aware of it. Who created something out of nothing? To put it bluntly, those of you who rely on the hard work of my Hua family to live a stable life, what else can you do besides eating and waiting to die? Guo Yin was so angry that stars appeared in front of his eyes. He never expected that a little girl could speak so cunningly. Fan Qingjiao's voice continued, "My grandma is ill in bed, and my mother alone takes care of her. I just want my grandma and uncles, as well as the subordinates who are loyal to the country, to go on a smooth journey. How can you, sir? Even small wishes are not fulfilled." Guo Yin. There are more stars in front of you. Zhou Chun, the Minister of Rights, couldn't help but said, "Absurd. Hua Yaoding's men stabbed the third prince and everyone got the spoils. How can you allow a little girl like you to make sophistry here?" Fan Qingjiao looked at Zhou Chun without changing his expression. There are winners and losers in a competition, and there is a risk of injury if you lose. Mr. Zhou must at least understand this common sense even if he is wasting his time in the Ministry of Rights. Are you scolding him for eating and waiting to die or for being idle? Zhou Chun. Why are there stars popping up in front of my eyes? Fan Qingjiao turned slightly to face the people, pointed at the dazzling coffin, his eyes were red but said with a loud voice, "Everyone can forget the military life of those soldiers who defended the country, but the Hua family will never forget." The people gathered in the distance listened and watched, their hearts as heavy as a boulder. There have been rumors in the main city that the Hua family's subordinates murdered the third prince, and some people even rumored that the Hua family was rebelling. It turned out that General Hua's subordinates accidentally injured the third prince during the competition. Injuring the prince accidentally is a serious crime, but spending so many years in Ziliang to protect the family and the country, isn't it a meritorious service? Look again at the daughter of the Hua family kneeling alone in front of the palace gate. How old is she? Why should she suffer such injustice? The originally quiet crowd gradually began to become restless. Fan Zixiu, who was so angry with Fan Qingjiao that his chest hurt, didn't notice it at all. He looked at the evildoer who wanted to crush him to death on the spot and said, "It's full of nonsense. It's a fact that the Hua family has become a prisoner. It's only because of the mercy of the emperor that you have a chance to repent. If you really don't want to repent, don't blame us for being ungrateful." Fan Zixiu looked at the guards behind him and pointed at the coffins, "Come here. Let me smash them. Let's see who dares to smash it." This time, there was no need for Fan Qingjiao to speak again. The people in the distance just gave up. The Hua family has been loyal to the country for generations. If it weren't for the Hua family's desperate battles, where would the current prosperity be? The Hua family has been loyal to the country and dedicated to the people for generations. How can you, the civil servants, slander and frame them at will? Many of General Hua's subordinates have hurt the third prince, so why do they want to capture all the men of the Hua family? If it is said that General Hua's subordinates are deliberately plotting to kill the third prince, then show evidence. If it is said that the Hua family intends to rebel, then show evidence. If nothing can be produced, we will fight whoever dares to touch the coffin today. The common people regarded the brand new and dazzling coffins as their only belief and protection for the Hua family. The voice of anger soared into the sky, and there was no need to express the desire to rise up. Fan Zixiu was so frightened that his face instantly turned pale and he broke into cold sweat. For several days in a row, he helped concubine Yu quietly spread rumors about the Hua family's rebellion in the main city. How come these stupid people turned against each other en masse just because of this evil obstacle? Fan Qingjiao could see Fan Zixiu's panic in full view. To see a doctor, pay attention to looking, hearing, listening and feeling. It is more appropriate to see first and then smell. The same is true for the human heart. Compared with what you hear with your own ears, what you see with your own eyes is more convincing. The questionings came one after another like an overwhelming force, which made several ministers present take a few steps back. Fan Kinjao knelt on the ground, his expression still the same as before, but the tight grip on his sleeves was finally a little looser. Her power alone is not enough to shake the imperial power, but the power of the people can resist everything. Especially that person has always wanted to be a wise and benevolent king. She wanted to see how long he could sit in the palace and pretend to be deaf and dumb in the face of the people's anger and condemnation. Amid the condemnation, Fan Kinjao looked at Wu Zhongtian. Among the group of people this time, he was the only one who didn't speak. This is inconsistent with my memory. In the last life, he was the most provocative. Wu Zhongtian trembled when Fan Kinjao saw him. Open your mouth at the beginning, and the rest is all about fighting. One bite is a piece of meat. A prime minister and 2 ministers of the 6th ministry were all blinded by the shock. If he spoke at this time, not only would he not be able to reverse the situation, but he would also be reviled along with the others. The people outside the palace gate became more and more courageous, and even the guards were almost unable to stop them. Wu Zhongtian quickly turned around and ran towards the palace gate. Your Majesty. Ministers. I can't stand it anymore. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 96. Chapter 96, I have to meet someone. I want to see the corpse. In the Yueyu Palace. Emperor Yongchang looked at Wu Zhongtian kneeling in front of him, his eyebrows twisted into knots. This is his important minister. He talks eloquently in the court all day long, talking about the people of the world, the country, and the country. But now he can't even deal with a little girl. And the more incompetent the minister is, the more it highlights Hua Yaoding's extraordinary ability. Hua Yaoding has been making great achievements in these years, and the girl from the Hua family has a pair of hands that can turn stone into gold. He is no longer defensive, but afraid. But after all, the Hua family has been loyal to the country for so many years. If he really learned a lesson from this incident, he would not hold him accountable anymore. Your Majesty, what's wrong? His Highness is vomiting blood, a palace maid hurried over. Emperor Yongchang got up and walked to the back room, and saw his son lying on the bed with a weak look on his face, half of his face stained red by the blood spit out from his mouth. Concubine Yu knelt down beside the bed and cried heartbrokenly as she looked at the unconscious third prince. Son, General Hua has spent his whole life defending the country and fighting as an army. How can your father endure severe punishments? Concubine mother knows that you are resentful and even more aware of your suffering. But don't worry, if you really have any trouble, my mother-in-law will definitely go down and accompany you. Emperor Yongchang stood not far away, watching and listening. All the affection he had for the Hua family disappeared in an instant. Turning around and walking back to the main hall, Emperor Yongchang looked at Prince Rui and said, "Is there any news from the Shenxing department?" King Rui hurriedly took a few steps forward and said, "Yesterday, the Chief of Punishment made a decision. I will go there in person." Emperor Yongchang nodded. A place like Shenzhengxi that eats people without spitting out their bones. Anyone who goes in will spit out something. Even if he really can't spit anything out, someone will put something into his mouth and make him spit it out. Otherwise, he would not have given the matter to King Rui when King Rui asked for orders. In the back room, concubine Yu didn't wipe the tears from her eyes until she heard Emperor Yongchang's order. Now that the emperor has no intention of asking further questions about Yuzhu, she will take this opportunity to eliminate the Hua family. She knew that the emperor still had feelings for the Hua family, and what she had to do was to cut off all these feelings. After all, no matter how they go in the future, it is impossible for the Hua family to get on her boat. The foot of the dead rabbit hidden under the bed was exposed. "Concubine," Yu ordered in disgust, "sneak this beast into the backyard and bury it. It's so dirty." The palace maid did not dare to delay and quickly carried the blood-drained rabbit out of the door. Not long after, King Rui hurriedly came to the front hall with the charges against him. Emperor Yongchang looked at it roughly, and his eyebrows suddenly frowned. He did not expect that King Rui would be so bold as to accept such a serious crime. "What about the guy in the criminal division?" "I just died." Emperor Yongchang didn't ask any more questions and waved his hand. "This is good, only in this way can the Hua family never become an existence that he is afraid of." King Rui breathed a sigh of relief and quickly handed over the charges in his hand to Wu Zhongtian. Wu Zhongtian didn't dare to delay, so he walked towards the palace gate with the accusation in hand and the wind on his feet. He had no confidence just now because he had no evidence in his hand, but now it is different. He has the bright evidence in his hand. Who else does he fear? In the open space outside the palace, several ministers were still in a stalemate with Fan Qingjao. They really hate Fan Qingjao now so much that their teeth ache. Especially Fan Zixiu. He wanted to tear Fan Qingjao into pieces with his own hands to relieve his anger. Fan Qingjao knelt firmly on the ground and glanced at the people in front of him calmly. "It's such a hot summer, but the adults are pale and covered in cold sweat. I'm afraid it's because of kidney damage. If the adults don't mind, I'll wait for you in a few days. I will personally send the prescription to the mansion." Several ministers with kidney deficiency. "How come we are sweating profusely in such hot weather?" "It's all thanks to you." It's just that the same words have different meanings when they fall into the ears of people far away. Look at this daughter raised by the Hua family. Even if the Hua family is trapped by an adulterer, the daughter of the Hua family can still care about the health of the courtiers so uprightly. Look at the few people surrounding Miss Huajia. Why, they are simply worse than animals. Hua Yaoding's subordinates intended to rebel, but were unable to do so. Therefore, when competing with the third prince, he deliberately injured the third prince's life and gained the stolen goods. He knew that he had no words to face the emperor, so he committed suicide in fear of crime after being signed. Wu Zhongtian almost shouted at the top of his lungs when he read the evidence of crime in his hand. Hearing this, the two ministers of the sixth ministry were filled with only two words: relieve their anger. Fan Zixiu looked at Fan Qingjao and said, "Even the guilty minister himself has confessed to Hua Yao, what else can you say?" In order to prove that what he said was true, Wu Zhongtian personally took the incriminating evidence, held it high, and walked toward the people in the distance. The people were all silent as they looked at the incriminating evidence and the dazzling red handprints. If the Hua family really intended to rebel, they would not help. For a time, all the public opinions incited by Fan Qingjao dropped to freezing point again. Fan Zixiu glared fiercely at Fan Qingjao, who was kneeling down. "Why don't you just go back to the Hua family and deal with your crime? As for what happens to the Hua family, the emperor will make his own decision." Fan Qingjiao's palms, which were already holding blood stains, clenched tightly again. Unexpectedly, I hurriedly rushed, but I was still a step late. The subordinates who died tragically in the Shenxing division were probably carefully selected and carefully trained by my grandfather. That subordinate would never have thought that he would have to bear such infamy even to the point of death. Fan Qingjao raised his chin slightly, his fair face facing the sun. At this moment, she completely tore off her usual pretense. The chief of Shenxing said that he intended to rebel, and the chief of Shenxing said that he deliberately harmed the third prince's life. Since the chief of Shenxing said what he said, what else can be tried? Fan Zixiu was so angry that his face turned green. "The sinner is dead. No matter how strong your arguments are, there is still no proof." Fan Qingjao smiled coldly. In front of the Tao family's medical skills, there has never been a case of death without evidence. I also asked a few adults to carry out the body of that subordinate and make it public. Whether he confessed on his own initiative or was forced into a crime will only be known by me at a glance. Several ministers in the 6th ministry were completely confused. Why is this thing so different from what they imagined? Wu Haoshan didn't expect that even though he had produced evidence of his crime, he was unable to silence Fan Qingjie. He was so angry that he almost burst his lungs. Little girl from the Hua family, what on earth do you want to do? Fan Qingjie replied in a sonorous voice, you want to see people alive. You want to see corpses when you die? Even if only the body parts are left, I will accept them all. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 97. Chapter 97. This flattery is so skillful. The methods of the Shenxing division are inherently shady, not to mention that this time King Rui is presiding over the trial. The people present were all members of the third prince, so they naturally knew what method King Rui used to obtain this confession. Standing there were all the ministers who wanted to poke a big hole at the entrance of the palace, and they were almost breaking out in cold sweat. If the body is really taken out, wouldn't it be clear that he is not asking for trouble? These ministers are all members of the court. Why are you so secretive? Or are you simply using some shady means to frame my grandfather's subordinates so that they can sacrifice their lives for Ziliang? A passionate soldier was wronged. Several ministers are already confused and don't know how to answer at all. Fan Qingjie didn't even think about waiting for their answer, because he already knew the answer. She suddenly moved her knees and walked up to the majestic palace. She heard the sound of gold and jade, shouting loudly, the treacherous officials are in power. The villain has his way. Use power and power. All loyal and upright people will be beaten. The people are heartbroken. The emperor is benevolent and kind. Know people and be kind, Ren. I will not be deceived by traitors. I will definitely give innocence to those who serve the country with all their heart. As soon as he finished speaking, Fan Qingjie slowly bent down in the direction of the palace. She closed her eyes tightly, her mouth was full of blood, and she knocked her head heavily on the ground. She certainly knew that the emperor was to blame for the disaster that had befallen the Hua family. She also knew that without the emperor's connivance, no matter how arrogant anyone was, they would not dare to charge the Hua family with conspiracy. But no matter how much she hates her, she still has to say something and kowtow to her head. She is not afraid of pain, let alone humiliation. She only hopes to save the Hua family from this disaster and hopes that her grandfather will return safely. The crowd in the distance started to boil again. Standing here now are not only the people who have been able to live and work in peace and contentment under the protection of the Hua family. There are also family members and relatives of the Hua family. They know General Hua's merits and hard work. Over the years, their men, sons, and even older brothers and younger brothers have fought with General Hua on the battlefield, riding horses in all directions. Those who are alive have received the honors they deserve, and which one of them who has died has not received relief from General Hua every year? At this moment, looking at the thin figures kowtowing to the palace, thinking about the exciting words just now, how can they still be calm, how can they still watch indifferently? Seeing the thin little daughter of the Hua family fighting for the family on her own, all the family members and relatives of the Hua family also knelt on the ground. They kowtowed with tears in their eyes and shouted, Your Majesty is wise. I beg your Majesty to give the Hua family a clean slate. When the people who had been moved by it for a long time saw this, their eyes were filled with tears and their chests were sore. Following the movements of the family members, they also knelt on the ground one after another, kowtowing together with Fan Qingjie. For a time, a huge crowd of people knelt down and worshipped, forming a wave of people. Looking from a distance, it looks like a rolling river. The petitions one after another filled the air, penetrated the clouds and cracked the rocks. Your Majesty is wise, I beg your majesty to give the Hua family a clean slate. Your majesty is wise, I beg your majesty to give the Hua family a clean slate. Amidst the thunderous petitions, several ministers headed by Fan Zixia were stunned on the spot, as if they had been struck by lightning. Looking at Fan Qinjiao, who was leading the trouble, they gritted their teeth with hatred. But no matter how much they hated, no one dares to move an inch. Given the overwhelming momentum of the people, if they dared to touch a hair on Fan Qinjiao's head, would those people eat up their old bones alive in minutes? And such a loud and earth-shattering voice could be clearly heard by the people in the palace even if no one needed to convey it. Even the third prince, who had been lying on the bed pretending to be unconscious, could no longer pretend anymore. He knew that Fan Qinjiao was powerful, but he didn't expect that he had such ability. In this case, he couldn't let go even more. Fan Qinjiao. He is determined. Emperor Yongchang, who was sitting in the main hall of Yuya Palace, his face was so dark that he could hardly see his facial features clearly. You took the initiative to lead people to cause trouble, but you still flattered him so openly. The emperor's wise words outside the palace soared into the sky, making him unable to speak even if he wanted to punish the girl severely. Emperor Yongchang was afraid of the Hua family's military power, but he really didn't want the lives of everyone in the Hua family. Which emperor doesn't like fame, and which emperor hopes to wait 100 years for himself to be scolded by the people? Concubine Yu secretly looked at the emperor's face and thought something bad, so she quickly said, "Your Majesty, the reason why Hua Yaoding's subordinates seriously injured the third prince is..." Before he finished speaking, he received a warning look from Emperor Yongchang. "Don't think that I don't know what you did secretly. I won't tell you, but that doesn't mean I'm blind. YT. The slave is here. Bring me the imperial edict." "Yes." Emperor Yongchang lowered his head and considered the imperial edict that he had already formulated in his heart over and over again before he put down the pen. With the assassination of the third prince this time, all the goals he wanted have been achieved, and there is really no need to eliminate the root cause. Besides, the girl from the Hua family's hand that turned stone into gold really made him reluctant to let go. In this case, he might as well leave a little room, so that the girl from the Hua family can continue to pay for it willingly. Concubine Yu looked at the words written on the imperial edict, her internal organs trembling with anger. She used the safety of the third prince to add fuel to the fire, and that dead girl just incited the people to throw snow. It's really hateful. In a blink of an eye, he glanced at King Rui next to him. Even if Hua Yaoding can't be killed, she still has to bite off a piece of Hua family's flesh. Now that the great feud has been settled, if the Hua family is given a chance to stand up again, the Hua family will definitely become the hardest stumbling block for Zir in his quest for power. King Rui was stunned for a moment, but he soon thought of something and sneaked out of Yuya Palace. Bai Tu personally carried the imperial edict and ran out of the palace gate. At the entrance of the palace, Fan Qinjiao was still kowtowing, his plump forehead already covered in blood. Bai Tu's mouth twitched in pain, and he quickly spread out the imperial edict in his hand. "By God's decree, the emperor ordered that Hua Yaoding's subordinates stab the prince. This is a serious matter, and it is undisputed. The Hua family cannot escape the blame. He should be punished for his crimes. The Hua family has been loyal to the country for many years and is exempted from the death penalty. Even if they are guilty of living, all the men of the Hua family will be sent to the army. One step from the city, a gift." All the achievements in his life were wiped out, and all the men in the Unicom Hua family were also cut off. Wanting to inflict a crime is a taboo for the emperor. There's no need to worry. But Fan Qinjiao knew that this was the best ending for the Hua family. As long as people are alive, there is still hope. Bai Tashang bent down and handed over the imperial edict in his hand. He really admired this young lady from the Hua family. Just this courage and courage. Even if you search carefully among the girls in the main city, you won't be able to find the second one. Thinking like this, even her voice was rare and polite. Miss Hwajia, why, don't worry, the emperor still thinks of the good of Hwajia, and Miss Hwajia Y is still the head of Qingping County. The Lord of Qingping County. Be quiet and low-key, keeping things in peace. It's as ridiculous as my grandfather's title. Fan Kinjao received the imperial edict expressionlessly. My lord, I thank you for your kindness. The word kindness is deliberately bitten to death, and the irony is self-evident. Xiao Kinjao. A familiar voice suddenly sounded. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 98. Chapter 98. Another trouble. All the coldness and defensiveness on Fan Kinjao's face disappeared, and he looked not far away in astonishment. In the palace gate, a tall and upright figure was walking slowly, and that majestic and loving face looked so familiar. Fan Kinjao's eyes turned red for a moment, and he opened his bitten mouth for a long time before calling softly, "Grandpa." Hua Yaoding's eyes were also red, and he rushed to his granddaughter with several strides, all ready to question her. "Why didn't you follow my instructions and join my men? Why do you have to be so willful? Why don't you do what I told you to do?" But when he saw his granddaughter, her back was straight even when she was kneeling on the ground. The granddaughter who wants to save the lives of all the men in the Hua family even if she has a head. The granddaughter who will fight alone even if she is determined to die. Thousands of words condensed into just one action. In full view of everyone, Hua Yaoding pulled up Fan Kinjao who was kneeling on the ground and hugged him tightly. It's really his little Kinjao. Only his little Kinjao can do this. Fan Kinjao felt his grandfather's embrace and slowly closed his eyes. Nothing is warmer than this belated embrace. The people in the distance looked at this touching scene with red eyes. But they did not cry, let alone let the tears flow. It is a good thing and a happy event that the Hua family has been saved. Their general survived, and the Hua family also survived. Silly girl, does it hurt? Hua Yaoding pulled away slightly, looked at Fan Kinjao's forehead, and frowned in distress. Fan Kinjao smiled and said, "Grandpa is fine." In the past, Hua Yaoding would have said that this was what a daughter of the Hua family should do, but now, he just said, "It's okay. If it hurts, Grandpa will blow it on you." Fan Kinjao nodded and held his grandfather's arm. "Grandpa, let's go home." The setting sun reflected on the figures of the grandfather and grandson, warm and bright. The common people surrounding the palace gate followed unconsciously. It seems to be escorting, but also seems to be seeing off. At the gate of the palace, several ministers from the 6 ministries were completely ignored. At first glance, it is not as inviting as the stone lion in front of the palace gate. Even if the Hua family is dismissed from office, even if the men of the Hua family are exiled, none of them can laugh. Because they knew very well that this was completely different from what they had expected. To be honest, Fan Kinjao won this battle. How beautifully she won with 1 against 4, how slapped they were in the face. Guoyin looked at Fan Zixio sourly and said, "Prime Minister Fan really has raised an incredible granddaughter." Zhou Chun snorted, "I just wonder if your granddaughter will be so dedicated when something happens to Prime Minister Fan in the future." Wu Haoshan added in a leisurely manner, "It's too much to judge visually. They not only want to fight, but they also want to fight to the death." If only Fan Kinjao had been a little more concerned about his grandfather, they would not be as embarrassed as they are now. To put it bluntly, it's not that you, Prime Minister Fan, lack majesty, honor, and ability. Fan Zixiu. If he hadn't held Bai Tu's arm, he would have been so angry that he fainted on the spot. The voices of forcing the palace gradually subsided, and the main city returned to its former peace. Only the brand new coffins were left in front of the palace gate, stimulating the attention of everyone in the palace. Everyone who was still waiting for the news at Hua's house was so anxious that they didn't know what to do. Boom dash. The ajar door was suddenly knocked open, and dozens of guards rushed through the door in plain sight. Mammy Su took a step forward and blocked Ninghan and the other maids behind her. "How dare you break into the Hua family mansion? Huajia, where is the Huajia?" a sneer sounded. As the guards made way for him, King Rui walked forward in a swaggering manner. In the past few years, Su Yan met with the old lady and met Rui Wang. After a while, he kneeling on the ground, the old slave pleases the king of Rui. King Rui looked at Nanny Su kneeling in front of him, and the sneer on his lips became even stronger. "Who do you think you are you qualified to greet me?" While speaking, he even raised his foot and kicked Nanny Su in the chest. Mama Su's old body was kicked to the ground, and she fainted without even taking a breath. No one expected that King Rui would take action as soon as he said it, and everyone in the yard was shocked. Ninggan hurriedly ran to Nanny Su and saw blood oozing from the corners of Nanny Su's mouth. When she raised her head, her eyes were full of anger. "This is the Hua family. Aren't you afraid of losing your sense of propriety by taking action as the prince said?" Ningtian and Lanja also walked up from behind, blocking Nanny Su and Ninggan from behind. The lady handed over this home to them before she left. "As long as they are around, no one can touch the Hua family." King Rui was so angry that his chest hurt. He came to see the Hua family in distress, but these dead slaves turned out to be such an eyesore to him. Raising his hand suddenly, King Rui ordered viciously, "Come here. These slaves will be beaten to death by me." In an instant, dozens of guards surrounded all the servants in the courtyard. They pulled out the long knives from their waists without any explanation and attacked everyone present. One of the maids who was closest to the guards was grabbed by the hair and wiped across her neck. Blood splattered, staining the floor tiles of the yard red, and also stained everyone's eyes red. The wolf Fang itself had the aura of a wolf, and when he saw the blood, his pupils stood up. He let out an animal roar as if instinctively, and rushed directly towards the guard who killed the maid. Ningtian was protecting Ninggan and Nanny Su, entangled with 7 or 8 guards. Suddenly, a guard raised his long sword and slashed at Ningtian's back. Ninggan was so frightened that she shouted, "Sister!" Blood spattered again, but Ningtian did not feel the expected pain. She turned around and saw a maid standing behind her. The sharp long knife slashed from the maid's shoulder all the way to her lower back, even the bones were exposed. The warm blood sprayed all over Ningtian's face, dyeing her elegance red as well. The maid fell heavily to the ground, but she did not cry out for pain or injustice. She just looked at Ningtian and used her last bit of strength to say, "Ning, Sister Ningtian, sister, old lady and Madam R, it is young lady's life, you must protect her, they." Ah dash. A heart-piercing scream rushed out from Ningtian's mouth. She turned to look at the guards who were approaching Ninghan and Nanny Su again, and rushed over like crazy. The maids and servants in the courtyard fell one after another, and their blood gradually gathered into a red river sticky to their feet. King Rui sat on the chair brought by the guards, smiling and watching. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 99. Chapter 99. King Rui is really powerful. Wang Rui, who was immersed in the joy, never noticed a figure passing quickly outside the door of Hua's house. On a remote road outside the main city. Xiaoxian knelt on the ground and repeated exactly what he had just seen. Because he was worried about His Highness, he and the Fifth Highness went back first, while the others were still on the way under the protection of Lin Yi. Bailey Lingyu was shocked when he heard this, that old and immortal King Rui, do you still have any shame? It's a good thing he can do such things as bullying women and children who are sick and disabled. Bailey Fengming frowned. Since King Rui dared to go to Hua's house to cause trouble privately, it proved that Ayao won in the palace. If this were not the case, concubine Yu would not have jumped over the wall in a hurry. Slowly he took out a human skin mask from his arms, and Bailey Fengming gently covered his face. Xiao Xian saw that his highness in front of him seemed to be a different person, and he was not surprised at all. This is specially made for his highness by the Ji Yuan judge, but his highness has never had a place to use it. Bailey Lingyu. Inexplicably, I feel envious. Xiao Xian, go pick Ayao back to Hua's house. Remember not to disturb General Hua. The old man has been struggling for a long time and cannot bear this. As soon as the words fell, everyone had disappeared on their horses. After hearing the order, Xiao Xian stood up and was about to fly to the city, but Bailey Lingyu held his shoulder down. Where is the need for you in such an exciting thing? I'll go. As soon as he finished speaking, the man also flew towards the city gate. Xiao Xian shouted worriedly, Your Highness, your face. Bailey Lingyu didn't care at all, don't worry, Your Highness has his own solution. Xiao Xian. It's strange that you can rest assured. In the yard of Hua's house, Ning Tian, who was covered in blood and stab wounds, used his last bit of strength to lie on Ninggan's body. King Rui suddenly stood up, took out the long knife from the waist of the guard beside him, and waved it directly towards Ning Tian. Whoosh! Ta Shui flew out of the house and bit King Rui on the leg. The sharp teeth penetrated deeply into King Rui's flesh, and the pain was so painful that King Rui almost lost his breath. King Rui screamed, raised the long knife in his hand and slashed at Ta Shui. A long was opened on Texu's back, and the blood dyed the snow-white fur all over his body red. Ninggan cried heartbreakingly, stepping on the snow. Ta Shui, who was kicked away by King Rui, didn't even have time to choke before he hit the far wall hard. King Rui covered his arm and was glad that he had brought out all the guards in the palace. I didn't expect that the defeated Hua family would actually hide two slaves who were so capable of fighting. If there weren't so many others, I'm afraid he would be the one lying in a pool of blood now. In the room, Tao Yuxian, who was awakened by the sound outside, walked out with the help of Hua Yuelian. The first thing you see is the mess in the yard, and the seriously injured servants. Everything that is so obvious needs no further explanation. Hua Yuelian trembled in shock, but Tao Yuxian held her hand. King Rui looked at Hua Yuelian and Tao Yuxian and said with a smile, the old lady of the Hua family and the young lady of the Fan family, oh no. King Rui paused for a moment, and his eyes became even more mocking. It should be said that Miss Hua's parents don't seem to know that your good daughter and granddaughter is so bold that she dares to force the palace by herself, so what I am doing now is just nothing. It's just a matter of courtesy. Hua Yuelian was scared to death when she heard these words. She knew that Yuya would never sit idly by when she came back, but she never expected that she would go to force him to have a baby. Wang Rui stared happily at Hua Yulian's face, just waiting for her to show a pitiful look of panic and helplessness. Result. Tao Yuxian's eyes were full of majestic coldness. The life or death of the Hua family is uncertain. Xiao Qinjiao just wants to find an explanation for the Hua family. What's wrong? King Rui did not expect that Tao Yuxian would still be so stubborn until now, bringing hundreds of coffins to block the palace gate. This move is basically contempt for the imperial power and forcing the palace. Tao Yuxian, however, said without changing his expression, 100 coffins are just for sending off relatives, right and wrong. King Rui. Damn Hua family women, each one is more difficult to handle than the last. No matter how strong your arguments are, it is an indisputable fact that Fan Qinjiao forced the palace. Now the emperor is furious and orders Hua Yaoding to die immediately as a warning to others. King Rui stared coldly at the only two women in the Hua family who could still stand. Hua Yuelian was stunned when she heard that something happened to her father. She collapsed on the ground and her head went blank. King Rui took a step forward, his lowered eyes flashing with the most calculating and insidious light, Hua Yaoding is dead, and all the men in the Hua family who are in the punishment department cannot escape without exception. Instead of wasting your time here with me, you should think about how to save people. King Rui's words were like heavy hammers hitting Hua Yuelian's heart. She was in so much pain that she couldn't breathe. If all the men in the Hua family really, then the Hua family is really doomed. Even if the Hua family can really forgive Yu Yair's impulsiveness, how will Yu Yair behave in the future? The city's public opinion is full of right and wrong. Even if it is suppressed, Yu Yair will be crushed to death. So when Hua Yulian, who had completely fallen into despair, heard King Rui say that he could be saved, he rushed down the steps without any hesitation and grabbed King Rui's arm. Can it really be saved? King Rui snorted, of course we can save him, but it depends on whether your Hua family dares to do so. Hua Yulian didn't even think about it, she just nodded and said, dare, as long as I can save my father, I'm willing to do anything. King Rui stared at Hua Yulian in front of him, like a poisonous snake that had opened its mouth, even its eyes were glaring with poison. Since the death of the Hua family can calm down the anger, your Hua family can exchange lives for their lives. Anyway, all you have left in this house now are just the things of the lower class. Even if you can escape, you are just like ants. Ordinarily alive. He slowly took out a small, palm-sized porcelain bottle from his sleeve. As long as you are willing to drink the contents of this bottle, I am willing to report the truth to the emperor for you. The emperor is kind and will definitely spare Hua Yaoding from the death penalty. King Rui's words were harsh, but Hua Yuelian, who was desperate, could no longer care. She grabbed Prince Rui's sleeves pleadingly and said, if you want to kill me, I also ask Prince Rui to come to the palace and explain to the emperor after my death, so that my father will be exempted from the death penalty. Her life was worthless. If it could be exchanged for her father's life, she would not hesitate at all. In this way, the Hua family will still have hope. And her crescent moon. He will not become a sinner who is criticized by everyone. Having made up her mind, she reached out to grab the white porcelain bottle. Prince Rui kicked her away, his eyes full of sarcasm, and he smiled openly, women are really stupid. How much is your life worth? You don't deserve the emperor to show mercy to your Hua family. Hua Yuelian was stunned for a moment when King Rui looked in Tao Yuxian's direction again. That shameless smile and sinister voice sounded again, if the life of the Tao family doctor girl is included, that would be enough. Hua Yuelian's eyes widened and she shook her head like crazy, no, take my life. I will give my life to you. I just ask King Rui to let my mother go. Please already. King Rui looked on indifferently, completely unmoved. The emperor was afraid of the Hua family, not only because of Hua Yaoding's outstanding military exploits, but also because of the assistance of the Tao family's medical daughter. Similarly, concubine Yu was naturally concerned about this. Now that Hua Yaoding is sentenced to never return to the main city, if the Hua family no longer has the doctor daughter of the Tao family. In this way, even if the Hua family men are saved, it will be difficult to cause any big waves. So, Tao Yuxian's fate is decided by him. Just as he was thinking about it, he saw Tao Yuxian walking in front of him step by step. King Rui has such a deep plan. She looked straight at King Rui, her eyes that had been baptized by the disease could not conceal their sharpness and insight. Wang Rui was so frightened by the sight. It seemed that everything he was thinking had no place to hide in those eyes. Swallowing subconsciously, King Rui smiled and said, I am also thinking about the Hua family. Hua Yuelian turned around and threw herself at her mother's side, holding her mother's wrinkled hand, shaking her head like crazy, use my life is fine. Mother doesn't want it? My daughter, please live well. Please. Tao Yuxian looked at his daughter who was crying in front of her, but she smiled. My mother is old. How many more years can she survive even if she survives? I might as well be with you on that road. Furthermore, the fact that King Rui dared to come and take his life this time meant that it was clear that there were people in the palace who could no longer accommodate the Hua family. Even if that person is not the emperor, I am afraid he is still inferior to one person. The Hua family is now in a precarious state, but it is nothing more than fish and meat on the chopping board. If her life could really put an end to this disaster, she would think it was worth it. In this way, Tao Yuxian took the small porcelain vase from King Rui's hand without even hesitating. King Rui watched helplessly as she opened it, lifted the medicine bottle again, and then, "Prince Rui is really a powerful official," a voice suddenly sounded not far away. King Rui turned around and saw Bailey Fengming wearing a human skin mask coming slowly. End of this chapter. The legitimate daughter of the prosperous medical fragrance will not marry. Author, Jinchi. Chapter 100. Chapter 100. Murder to pay a life and pay a debt. On the streets of the main city, Fan Qinjiao accompanied his grandfather as he walked slowly in the direction of Hua's house. Even though her grandfather didn't say anything, she could still feel his weakness, so she kept slowing down. Out of the corner of his eye, he suddenly saw a familiar figure appearing in the alley not far away. Bailey Lingyu did not want to disturb Hua Yaoding, so she could only keep gesturing and speaking to Fan Qinjiao. Fan Qinjiao looked at the exaggerated movements, but he didn't smile at all. Just because she understood. King Rui took people to the Hua family, and something happened to the Hua family. That brief spoken word was like a thorn piercing into Fan Qinjiao's heart. Something happened to the Hua family. How could something happen to the Hua family? This time in the last life was when the Hua family was at its peak, but now the Hua family has suffered heavy losses one after another. What exactly went wrong? Fan Qinjiao forced herself to calm down. She also didn't want to worry her grandfather. She turned around and pretended to be relaxed. "Grandpa, do you think that person is weird? Why does he keep blinking?" Hua Yaoding was shocked when she looked into the alley. Fifth prince. The fifth prince in the alley. It's impossible to get out if you don't. Bailey Lingyu came over laughing. What a coincidence, old man. As he said that, he did not forget to glare at Fan Qinjiao. Damn girl, if you want to escape, use him as your backing. Doesn't it mean that your highness looks like a shield? Hua Yaoding quickly saluted. Shouldn't his highness fifth prince be in Yuzhu at the moment? Fan Qinjiao took the opportunity and hurriedly said, "Grandma is chatting while I go to Yuji to buy some cakes to bring back to grandma." Huttered, he hurriedly squeezed into the crowd. Hua Yaoding was stunned. "Xiao Qinjiao, you." Before he finished speaking, Bailey Lingyu grabbed him and said, "This matter is a long story. Since Mr. Hua is curious, His Highness is willing to come slowly." In the yard of Hua's house. King Rui squinted his eyes and looked at the person coming. "Who are you?" Bailey Fengming Shi Shiren walked to the opposite side of King Rui, blocking the Hua family behind him. The Hua family invited Mr. Wu. King Rui. What a joke. Whose Mr. Wu can have such amazing momentum? Bailey Fengming no longer looked at him, but first helped Hua Yuelian up, and then said to Tao Yuxian, according to Hua Lao's order, Xiao Sheng immediately went to Heshuo County Prince's mansion to report the matter to Heshuo. The prince has made his decision, and I believe that the prince of Heshuo will make his own decision. Tao Yuxian naturally knew that the Hua family had never invited Mr. Wu. But the young man in front of him was right. His general and Prince Heshuo did have some friendship. Although she didn't know who the visitor was, she had gone through many vicissitudes of life and did not detect any malice in this person. Tao Yuxian nodded in agreement, and said, "That's very good." King Rui. Completely numb. He dared to bring poison because no one in the Hua family could report the matter to the emperor. In this way, even if the Hua family died, there would be no evidence of death. But if this incident alarmed Prince Heshuo, Wouldn't all his pretense and lies be self-defeating? If the trouble goes to the emperor again, the consequences were something he didn't even dare to think about. Bailey Fengming turned around again and looked at the trembling palace man. King Rui kept saying that Hua Lao was ordered to die by the emperor. In that case, I think Prince Heshuo should also know about it. King Rui stood stiffly, not even knowing where to put his hands under his sleeves. Like a dog jumping over the wall, he suddenly pointed at Bailey Fengming and said, "Do you think you can get out of this mansion?" Bailey Fengming smiled leisurely, "Then it depends on whether King Rui has the ability to stay. If he had the intention to inform Prince Heshuo, he would not stand here anymore. He used the title of Prince Heshuo just to delay King Zhu Rui." But the unsuspecting King Rui didn't even know that he had fallen into Bailey Fengming's trap. Tao Yuxian looked at the lean and straight figure in front of him, his eyes gradually darkened. This man has an ordinary appearance, but his aura is amazing. Even if you try your best to suppress it, you can't hide the extraordinary Ling Ran within. The people in the yard were in a stalemate, when they suddenly heard the sound of footsteps. When everyone looked up, they saw Fan Qinjiao walking towards him with a cold face. The moment Bailey Fengming saw Fan Qinjiao also looked at him. Their eyes met, and a trace of distress overflowed from his bottomless eyes. The forehead had already shown how determined she was to force the baby to have a baby. The moment Fan Qinjiao saw him, his whole heart calmed down. Even though he was wearing a human skin mask, she could still see through all his disguises at a glance. It turns out that he was the one who stopped the Hua family from flowing into a river of blood and helped her prevent the Hua family from being destroyed. A trace of warmth flows through the bottom of my heart, even if it is fleeting, it is enough. The moment King Rui saw Fan Qinjiao, he knew that all his lies were untenable. Especially when he saw Fan Qinjiao walking towards the side step by step, he instinctively backed away. "Fan Qinjiao, what do you want? I am the current prince." However, Fan Qinjiao didn't even look at him, and just passed him by. King Rui secretly breathed a sigh of relief. Blood could be seen everywhere in the yard, and people fell to the ground everywhere. Fan Qinjiao's dark eyes swept over those people who fell on the ground or even in a pool of blood one by one. What was rolling in his calm eyes was the approaching storm. "Oh oh oh." A faint whimpering sound came from the corner of the wall. Fan Qinjiao followed the sound and walked over, only to see Ta Shui covered in blood. The originally snow-white down was now sticky with blood, and the chubby body fell limply to the ground. The gaping wound on his back made it choke in pain even when breathing. But even so, the moment it saw its master, its eyes were still filled with joyful determination. As if telling its owner that it did not disappoint her, let alone eat and drink for free, it was guarding this place. Fan Qinjiao slowly squatted down and took out the needle pack and a bottle of good gold sore medicine he carried with him from his arms. He carefully treated the injury that was deep enough to show the bone, and then fixed the skin and flesh with silver needles. Then he tore off his sleeves and wrapped them around Texu's body with a little force. From beginning to end, her movements were methodical, but the storm in her eyes was getting more intense. The Hua family has already settled, and she doesn't want to add to the dispute. But now, it seems that it is impossible to settle the matter. Must be killed to repay debts and money. If she doesn't settle this account clearly, how can she be worthy of the people around her who risk their lives to protect the Hua family? After hugging Ta Shui, Fan Qinjiao pulled out Ninghan who was underneath. It happened that Nanny Su also woke up at this time. The moment Ninggan and Aunt Su saw their young lady, tears flowed down uncontrollably. Fan Qinjiao wiped away the tears on their faces. "Now is not the time to cry. Please quickly arrange for the injured to be recuperated in Minjiao Yuan. There is medicine to stop bleeding on the cabinet in my room. Give it to them first, everything else will be discussed after I go there." After all, Nanny Su had seen some wind and waves, and Ninggan was trained by her. The two of them quickly adjusted their status. According to Fan Kinjao's instructions, they carried the injured people in the yard to Minjio courtyard in batches. With Fan Kinjao stood up again and walked to his mother and grandmother, checking them carefully. Fortunately, they are all safe. Grandma and mother will go inside to rest first, Fan Kinjao said, helping the two of them into the house. Hua Yuelian was still worried. She held Fan Kinjao's arm and asked, "You yatter, you." Tao Yuxian frowned and shook his head, "Come in. Since Yao Kinjao is back, I must be safe too." She has always been calm and thoughtful. The Hua family has already been entrusted to her, so she has to trust her. Seeing this, Hua Yulian knew that now was not the time to ask questions, so she quickly followed him into the house. Fan Kinjao helped his grandmother lie down, then pulled his mother to sit on the soft couch, and then put Texu on her lap. "Grandma and mother have a good rest and leave the rest to me." Hua Yuelian still felt uneasy when she thought about Yu Yatter facing Prince Rui. Tao Yuxian nodded, "You are now the head of the Hua family. It's up to you what to do." Fan Kinjao nodded, turned around and walked out the door. Hua Yuelian looked at Fan Kinjao's back and finally breathed a sigh of relief. Mother is right, her Yui has grown up, and she has to let go. In the courtyard, King Rui no longer cared about how to explain to concubine Yu, so he turned around and left. Fan Kinjao is back, and Hua Yaoding must be on his way soon. Wouldn't he be asking for death if he stays here any longer? Bailey Fengming stared at King Rui's movements and was about to stand up to stop him, when he heard a familiar voice behind him. "You've already come, so why should Prince Rui leave in a hurry?" End of this chapter.